With 5 games left on the schedule, we'll break down our top storylines for the rest of the regular season. Where will Miami end up in the final standings? Is Miami's offense or their defense their biggest concern? And is it time for a change to the starting lineup, one that requires bringing Kevin Love off the bench? We'll break it all down in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. However you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day and for hitting that subscribe button. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. We're going to do 5 storylines for the final 5 games of the Miami Heat season today. We're going to hit a bunch of things, including whether or not we're more worried about Miami's offense or Miami's defense. We'll get into whether or not they need to make a change to the starting lineup and look ahead to some decisions that they have to make this offseason with some of their own free agents. But let's start with the biggest one, which is what seed the Miami Heat are going to get. I know we've talked about it a lot, but every single day, this changes, David. This literally changes every day. Right now, the Miami Heat are 40-37, squarely in that 7th spot. A pretty fair amount of distance between them and the 8th seed, despite this 3-game skid. But it could have been a chance a few days ago they literally had one game to go ahead and snatch that 6th seed. They lose to Brooklyn. They lose to the Toronto Raptors. They lose to the Knicks. And now that idea of getting the 6th seed, most importantly, what that means is escaping the play-in tournament. That seems like it's less and less of a possibility. Let's just go over the next 5 games.
Well, we should also mention the fact also that Julius Randle going to be missing the next 2 weeks, so he's out for the rest of the regular season. Currently in the 5th seed, they could potentially drop to the 6th seed. Can Miami overtake them? It's a little bit more difficult to see the end picture here with so much murkiness, especially when Miami incapable of finding a way to win.
Yeah, and even if they do drop, that means either the Nets would move up or Miami could move all the way up to the 5th seed in like the best possible case scenario. But that would even require them probably running the table. It's Dallas at home Saturday night, then back to the road at Detroit, at Philadelphia, at Washington. That Philadelphia-Washington set's a back-to-back set. And then they finish the year at home against the Orlando Magic. They're probably going to be favored in 4 of those games, I would imagine. The Mavericks are a complete S show at this point. So I think at home they would be favored by against the Mavericks. They'll be favored in Detroit. They will not be favored in Philadelphia. They'll be favored in Washington. They'll probably be favored at home against the Orlando Magic. That doesn't mean anything.
No.
Other than that, they probably they ought to win those games. That's really the only thing that matters. It doesn't mean they will. It just means that if you're looking at that strength of schedule, it is favorable. Whatever that means, their strength of schedule is favorable because if you look at these last 3 games, it was a 3-game losing streak. It's very disappointing, but those were 3 tough games on the road. You know what I mean? These next games are not as difficult.
This feels like you're putting it out there for Miami to say, hold my beer. I'll find a way to not win any of those games. At this point, they're going to go 1-4 with the 1 win against Philadelphia.
That would not shock me.
No.
Let's compare that to the Nets. I know you brought up the Knicks, but the Nets are the team that's right in front of them right now. The Nets have 6 games left as opposed to Miami's 5. It's versus Atlanta, versus Utah, versus Minnesota, at Detroit, at home against Orlando, and then they finish the year at home against Philadelphia. Some interesting things there, right? That's a much tougher slate than what the Heat have. I mean, the Hawks are better than Dallas at this point. The Jazz are that's not an easy game. That's easier than Detroit. That Minnesota-Detroit set is
not going to be playing for anything. I'm just seeing some teams that aren't really going to be playing for anything.
Utah's playing for playing. They're still in the play-in mix, no?
No, they're not. I think they're mathematically out of it at this point. Minnesota's been playing really well, so that's their Philadelphia matchup in terms of what the most difficult game on their schedule. Because
they also have Philadelphia. But yeah.
Oh well, there you go. So they've got something to go. To a team that's
Utah's a game and a half out. You don't think that they're going to be playing hard?
They
play hard. That team's not we're not really playing for anything. I feel like they're always out there. I'm not overlooking Utah, but whatever. Agree to disagree.
That's fair.
Minnesota's a good team. Like you said, that's a really good team. And then you have to go on the road to Detroit after. That's not Detroit's the easiest team on their schedule, and it just kind of sucks for them that it's on the second night of a back-to-back, right? Like you can't pencil in any win on the second night of a back-to-back, not in today's NBA. And then Orlando's tough, but the Heat also play Orlando. And then against Philadelphia in the final game of the year. The interesting thing for the Nets is that Orlando at that point with 2 games left in the season, they could be looking to just lose those games and better their draft position. And then for Philadelphia, for the final game of the year, depending on how the seeding plays out, that could mean a lot for the 76ers, or that game could mean nothing for the 76ers, and they could rest all their players in that game. It just depends on what everything looks like over the next week and a half. So impossible to try to predict what all of that is. At the end of the day, the Heat need to finish with 2 more wins in the Brooklyn Nets. They're in that stretch. So let's say hypothetically the Heat go 3-2. Brooklyn would have to go 1-5 in order for the Heat to get the 6th seed. And that doesn't seem likely. Again, it's like it's not the easiest stretch for the Nets, but it's also not Milwaukee 6 times. You know what I mean? So
Miami's put themselves in a very bad place.
Yes.
They've almost looked at it and said, you know what, they're perfectly willing or not, they're likely to end up in the play-in tournament.
Yeah. According to the Ringer, they do like this everyday update on where these teams are most likely to land. 92% chance that the Heat end up in the play-in tournament.
That's just the math. I mean, there's no way around.
The math, man.
They could win the next 5 games, and then Brooklyn could lose 3 of those 6 games, and that'll give Miami the chance they need. But I don't see any possibility in which Miami finds reality and says, you know what, we're willing to go out there and play as well as we possibly can and get each of these last games. I don't know. I've said it before that the games seem to matter more when they play better under those circumstances. But they've been mattering over the last 3, and it hasn't really made much of a difference.
Whatever the opposite of in control of your own destiny, that's where the Heat are right now. It's literally the opposite of that. They need the Nets to completely just collapse in order for them to get there. So I think what becomes more important then, and just understanding that they're probably going to end up getting the 7th seed, right? That's the wins matter. You can't completely slide because I said that they have a nice cushion. It's a game and a half cushion at this point between them and the Hawks. So it's a fair enough cushion. I'm still not worried about them losing the 7th seed. But if you go 0-5, you're going to lose the 7th seed. You know what I mean? Like they should still keep the 7th seed. There's no reason why they shouldn't. Basketball Reference gives them a 69% chance of
looking ahead. Atlanta, Toronto, or Chicago, which of those teams can you pencil in a Miami victory for? Like they've lost to the Bulls, they've lost to the Raptors.
None.
The Hawks are
Chicago,
probably.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, they've lost to the Bulls.
Who has?
Aren't they in the? Yeah, the Bulls are in the 10th seed right now.
Wait, I'm sorry. What are you talking about?
The play-in tournament.
Yeah,
they'd have to fight. They'd have to face one of those teams for the.
In the play-in tournament. I thought you meant on the schedule. I was like, they don't play the Bulls.
No.
In the play-in tournament. In the play-in tournament. That's the thing. That was why it was important to avoid the play-in tournament. The Bulls have been pretty good lately. I know they're on a 2-game.
Got Miami's number for sure.
Streak. That's a very good point. The Raptors. They just lost to the Raptors and the Hawks. Like, I don't know. I'm actually least scared of the Hawks out of all those teams.
I was going to say that.
If you lose to the Hawks, then you're having to play one of Toronto or Chicago. Toronto and Chicago are very motivated to make the playoffs, right? And I would say based on our recent sample size, maybe more motivated than Miami Heat are to make the playoffs based on how they've been playing.
At least outwardly, yeah.
I'm with you on that. So I don't know. Given that they're probably going to end up being stuck at the 7th seed. I think the next 5 games becomes more about building good habits and getting into some sort of flow, something that you feel comfortable with going into that play-in tournament and then ideally coming out of that play-in tournament and getting into a playoff series. Offense, defense, neither has been awesome lately. Are we more concerned about the offense? Are we more concerned about the defense? I don't know. My answer might not be what you think. We'll get to that next. But David, first tell listeners about our sponsor.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The tournament is still going strong with the NBA playoffs almost here. Now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. It's a bonus bet back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, super easy to use. You can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to whether Miami even makes the play-in tournament. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet of up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Locked On Heat is available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so please do subscribe. We'll update our Heat culture bracket later on and then get into some questions about the starting lineup and look ahead to the offseason and wonder about some of the tough decisions that the Heat have to make. But let's talk about the offense and the defense. Both have been bad. Both have been bottom 10 in the NBA since the All-Star break. Both have been additionally worse in this recent 3-game losing streak. The Heat scored 192 and 92 points in those 3 games where it looked like the offense might have been turning a corner. And the defense just hasn't been good. Basically, again, since the trade deadline, since the All-Star break, they haven't been able to stop anybody. Let's start with the offense. And then I'm going to frame this as to which one you're more worried about. But let's just sort of drill down into the offense here. The three-point shooting has been a storyline. When we're talking about storylines, the three-point shooting has been a consistent thread throughout the entire season, right? They were the number 1 team in three-point percentage last year. They are not at all this year. They're one of the worst teams in three-point percentage this season. Still, over the last 10 games, David, they're in the top. They are top 10 in three-point percentage. So despite the recent 3-game losing streak, they're still trending in that right direction. I prefer the bigger sample over the smaller sample, as most statisticians would. So they're starting to trend in the right direction. There's three-point shooting wise. Offensively, where the problems are is that they're 29th in points in the restricted area. So they're just not getting to the basket. They're not getting those non-restricted area paint points nearly as much, nor are they getting those mid-range points that they relied on so much earlier in the year nearly as much. So is it enough just to say that the three-point shooting is enough of a sort of encouraging sign to think that this offense could still kind of flip it and make its way back into an above average unit?
No, absolutely not. I don't see any kind of sort of consistency here. Like even in the last 3 losses, they've shot poorly. And I think that's more representative of what this team is capable offensively. We've talked about this and kind of tying it together with the next question about which I'm more worried about. Miami's identity all season long has been offense based on their defense. Their transition defense in particular has been what's ignited the bulk of their easy offense because they can't generate points on their own. They don't have that bucket getter. Even Tyler Herro, their best bucket getter, requires screen after screen in order to free himself to get open and maybe get his shot down if it happens to be falling. The three-point shot hasn't been falling. It hasn't been falling all season. So I don't see that even with the improvement from the perimeter, that it's going to be something consistent enough for them to say, you know what, this is where we're leaning. We're going to be improving. We're going to be able to generate enough points to be able to beat an opponent. So it's all tied together here, I know, in terms of their offense and their defense and which one I think they need to lean into. But if you're going to ask that question, and I know if you want to hold off on, that's fine. But I mean, it's a peek behind the curtain what we already know. Yeah.
Can I give you a reason that I am?
You're going to tell me that the offense is more of an issue or a concern for the Heat?
No, I think I'm actually more optimistic about the offense than the defense. I think the bones of this offense are better than the bones of the defense, and that's a low bar. I've never believed in this defense, and I'll get to that why, but in a minute. But I think with the shot make, the three-point shooting being where it's been over the last 15 games, and assuming that eventually there was going to have to be some sort of positive regression to the mean, I believe in that.
Good assumption.
I guess, like I said, it's a low bar, man. But as long as Jimmy Butler's on the court, this team scores points. And it's not always pretty, but they score points. And they get to the free throw line. They don't turn the ball over a lot. To call this offense efficient feels like it would be a stretch. But they don't just give up stuff, right? Like they at least give themselves opportunities. They miss a lot of shots, but they give themselves a lot of opportunities. So I think the bones of the offense are actually better than the bones of the defense. The defense has been built up on smoke and mirrors all season long. They are over-reliant on jamming up passing lanes, creating turnovers. They're undersized. They have to work so hard. Like, as hard as they have to work offensively, and everything you said was a great point and was well said, they have to work doubly hard defensively to stop anybody. They were doing it by creating those turnovers in order to end possessions. But in terms of just stopping the guy in front of them from getting to the basket behind them, they're not that good at that. They're not.
No.
And I know that we look at guys like Caleb Martin and Haywood Highsmith as like, okay, like these are good high-level defenders, Gabe Vincent. But I would just propose this to you. Like, is DeMar DeRozan scared of going against Haywood Highsmith? Is he scared of going against Caleb Martin? No.
No.
You're
But
asking those guys to get switched off of you. And so I don't think that the defense is that good.
No, look, you might be right. Again, though, you just said, and it's kind of contradictory of you there, because you just said that the larger sample size is more indicative of what the team should be, or at least where you tend to gravitate in terms of what you view from what this team is capable of.
Yeah.
And I think that's still I think you're going to give up points. You're going to give up points, even aberrational type points, where it's going to be some random player who's going to wind up having a career high night, because that's just the way the defenses work. Constant switching, constant motion, closeouts, just forcing bad shots or challenging shots, and that's just the way they do things. I don't think that's going to stop, and that's why I lean more towards the defense being able to take that next step, because it's been better than average all season long, or for most of the season, and it's just the addition perhaps of Kevin Love and the post All-Star break, I don't know, humdrum nature of the season that's kind of dogged the defense down. I still think that if you're gonna look at this team as more capable of, or where they should lean in terms of their identity, it's got to be the defense. The offense are going to get enough points. Maybe Jimmy's got it dialed up. Maybe playoff me makes a return. Maybe somebody else steps up. Maybe Bam finally, figures it out. I was going to say something else about getting his head out of somewhere, but that's up to him. As far as the defense is concerned, we've seen it be more effective, and I think that's still where they're going to be better moving forward.
I don't disagree with anything. I don't appreciate you using my own argument against me, because that has nothing to do with it. But you're right. No, the larger sample always, and you can go beyond this season and go to the last 34 seasons prior, has been the defense, right? And so in terms of which way the Heat are going to lean, because I know that's been sort of a topic of conversation, they're going to lean defense. That's by default. They always will. I'm just telling you, I'm actually more worried about the defense, because despite the larger sample size, you're right. It is a little contradictory, but I'll say what I said before. I never believed in the defense in the first place. They're going to play really hard. They're going to play really hard on offense too.
But that works.
The best skill they have is playing really hard. No, I don't think it does. No, because when I was trying to say, like in the playing tournament, if it's DeMar DeRozan, if it's in the playoffs, first round against Jason Tatum,
you're right.
Like there's so many spots for those great wing players to isolate and pick against.
That's the thing, though. That's the nature of this team. They could keep a team to under 97 points, which again is objectively a great defense, and yet you're going to still give up 35 points to DeMar DeRozan.
They do that more because it's like the pace slows down in a Jimmy Butler game, and like the points per possession stuff is not great. Even in those like 97 point games, like the points per possessions are not where they should be. They aren't. And you're right. Like, Julius Randle, DeMar DeRozan, Jason Tatum are going to go off, but those guys used to not go off against the Heat. That's the difference. It was random scrub Heat killer going for 35 points, and then the Heat's still winning. Now Julius Randle will go out and score 48 points, and the Knicks win. That's just a normal basketball game. That's what is supposed to happen. Your best player is supposed to lead you to a win, and the Heat are just giving up those things more than ever because they don't have the stoppers, because you can't just ask Bam and Jimmy to literally do everything on both ends of the court and be the leaders in the locker room, and then do the press conference after and talk to us and then answer questions about why their teammates stink. Like, that's what they've been doing all year. And it's just, I don't.
Wow. I can't believe this argument. Like I've heard from you before that it's like, that's kind of their job, right? Like, especially when it comes to Jimmy. Like,
it is, but it's also, it is their
being
job.
Asked
100%. 100%.
I know they're
being asked.
Yeah. I don't know.
Do you have any confidence that the defense or the offense can, I don't even care about like the larger sample for the season, perform like a top 10 unit, whether or not they actually will be. You think that defense can perform in the top 10? I think
I'm going to hit it, and then I'll cop to that 100%. Okay. I think most of defensive pressure is based on effort, and I think players will tell you the same thing. I think that, and so given that, that's the X factor. Scheme, etc. Shooting, you could be the best shooter in the world and still go 1 for 10. And we've seen it not just from Duncan Robinson, but from Steph Curry and others. Like, that's just the nature of everything. Like, you're based on probabilities. But when it comes to defense, those probabilities will increase exponentially if you're willing to give effort. And I know that's very simplistic and cliche, and takes all the analytics and throws it out the door.
It's absolutely
play harder, you play better, especially on defense. And so given that, Miami's chances of being a better team are because they can find a way to muster the energy of defensive on the defense.
You have maintained this, and I respect you for it, that you believe that the Heat will eventually start playing harder. And I just think that they're just not
good enough to play harder.
I guess I don't know that they're not good enough. I think they're plenty good enough to play hard. I could play hard, and I stink. But it's like I just think that I've been waiting for this team to start playing harder, and they haven't. And it just feels like everything is on the line. Maybe it's your point. Like when it's actually the play-in tournament, when it's actually win or go home, maybe that's when they say, you know what? Maybe we should play hard tonight. Change the starting lineup. Going to change the starting lineup. Juice the defense. Maybe you could juice the offense too. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat. Reach Locked On Heat on Twitter, Instagram. You can email us, lockedonheat@gmail.com. We'll update our Heat culture bracket here in a little bit. But first, we'll continue on with our 5 storylines for the last 5 games of the season. Let's talk about the starting lineup and specifically Kevin Love's place in it. It hasn't been great since they've made that switch to Kevin Love at power forward, moving Caleb Martin to the bench. It's mostly had a negative net rating, although I will say this. Somehow, I'm not sure how this happened, David. That rating is now positive, a smidge over 0 at 0.4.
It's been positive
with Kevin Love.
I think it's been positive since his acquisition. Like again, that
was
never the
like
problem.
Negative 0.2 for a while, I think. So yeah, it's been basically not. It's been worse. It's been worse than when it was with Caleb, because when it was Caleb in there instead of Kevin Love, the original starting lineup, which also had, when it was Caleb with Gabe Vincent at point guard, not Kyle Lowry, it was plus 4.3. So basically 4 points per possession is worse than when it was Kevin Love. So it's worse in about the same amount of minutes. Now that Kevin Love's been in the lineup for a while, that group has played 227 minutes. The Caleb Martin version with Gabe Vincent has played 300, or with Gabe Vincent has played 300 minutes. No, that was the Kyle Lowry group. I'm sorry, I'm screwing this up.
No, either way. It's
and
then
the Caleb Martin with Gabe Vincent was plus 15.
The starting lineup hasn't been bad. That hasn't been the problem. It's been the bench production, and that's why. Yes. And now with Kevin, though, it's what was their strength is not as much of a strength anymore because he's not so good defensively. And even more importantly, he's not making enough shots to compensate for his defensive issues.
Has not been the offensive juice that they've been looking for. He's shooting 28% from 3 now as a member of the Heat.
Probably less, right? Given yesterday's 0 for 7 performance.
Yeah,
I don't know. It doesn't matter, but it's been bad. I don't know because I still like the idea of Kevin Love and the theory in which he'll bring some offense 28%. To compensate. Yeah. So I still like the way the rotation is shaken out, and we've seen it play out effectively. Maybe I'm pointing to just one game sample size here, but in the New York Knicks, it wasn't a problem. They faced those Knicks team in their victory last week. And it was a positive. As long as he's scoring, contributing, rebounding, doing what he can do offensively, it hasn't been as problematic on the defensive end. And I like where Caleb and Kyle fit in the rotation as far as the spark that they provide defensively, in particular, off the bench. And I don't know that you're going to be able to recreate that going into the play-in, playoffs, whatever, the next phase for this team, whatever it might be. I don't know if reinserting Caleb into the starting lineup is going to carry over from the success they had earlier in the season.
Yeah, look, the Kevin Love lineups have not been as good, but I still understand why they made that switch, is because they wanted to create a little bit more of a baseline on defense, just with size, right? Like so much of defense, you mentioned effort. A lot of it is just being big too. Sometimes that just helps. Sure. And they were putting a lot on Caleb Martin, and we saw how much did you and I talk about? Wow, Caleb is not playing as well right before the All-Star break as he was earlier in the season, because he was breaking down. He was running into that wall basically every single night. And so I understand wanting to move Caleb back to his natural position. And so given that Kevin Love is the only actual power forward on the roster, look, I don't know. And I also think that they're kind of in too deep at this point to make that switch. I could be wrong. I thought they were in too deep to make the switch after the All-Star break. I predicted that they would just keep Caleb Martin at the 4 because it was too late in the season to make that drastic a change. And I was wrong immediately. Like coming out the first game, Kevin Love in the starting lineup, they changed everything.
I think they'll be willing to make that change. I think they will.
Maybe they will. I mean, if they're that desperate, I just don't know if. I guess the question is that the solution to the problem? No. And I will say this: I know that we've all kind of that Kyle Lowry has looked better since he's come off the bench, but the problem with his lack of production is still a glaring one. Like if you're going to basically keep Oladipo out of the rotation, unless, you're going 10 or 11 deep because of foul trouble, or if Jimmy Butler's out and you're going to play him. But from an ideal rotation night to night, if Oladipo's not going to be a part of it, then I don't really know who that sixth man is. And if it's going to be Kyle Lowry, it's great that he's doing all this table setting stuff on offense, but you still need points, man. I think we just get so caught up in the nuance of the game and the advanced stats, and you and I, that's our job is to do that. But at the end of the day, points are the most important stat. And he's only averaging 8.4 points per game since he's come back and started coming off the bench. He scored 12, 9, 8, 7, 14, 3, 6, and then he didn't play against the Knicks last night. So you just need him to score more. And I hate to keep just dragging Kyle Lowry, but man, this lack of production. Now that he's playing as part of the second unit, and I know that they stagger a lot of their guys, and he's on the court a lot with one of Bam or Jimmy, and he's going to defer to those guys. But man, why are you deferring to Max Strus? Why are you deferring to Cody Zeller? Like, there's no reason for that. You don't even need to defer to Caleb Martin. Caleb Martin will figure it out. He'll just go get an offensive rebound or something.
Is it deferring or trying to get them going? Because I feel like that's his mentality in terms of being a point guard. And maybe
Either
he needs
way,
to
don't do it.
less
Get
of
you
that.
going. He needs to get
Right.
going. You're a six.
That's fair. Can I give you the answer?
I would love that. Have it. Right?
No, it's Haywood Highsmith. It's Haywood Highsmith as a starter.
At the 4.
Lean
for Kevin
defensively.
Love.
Yeah, lean defensively. Make that change. He's going to bring
And then Kevin
pressure.
Love is your backup 5.
You're backup 4. You could stagger him.
Okay.
Like, give Caleb the quick hook. I mean, I'm sorry, not Caleb. Give Haywood the quick hook. Like, put him in there for the first 5 minutes. Have him beat the hell out of whoever the opponent is, and just
So that Caleb doesn't have to do it. You're basically sat like he's just your pawn. Highsmith is the first pawn in front of the rook, and you're just like, here, you go, take the first bullet, and then Caleb Martin comes out.
That's what you do. That's what your job is as a coach. I love Eric Spoelstra around these here parts, but you've got the versatility. Like, I know it was a big challenge, and it has been for a challenge, during the Kelly Olynyk years. It's like, how do we get all these guys on the floor that have glaring weaknesses on every end? Well, that's what you do is you put them out there and figure it out, like what they do well. Your defense sucks as a starting lineup, right? Well, get the best defender on the team that isn't named Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler and put him out there. And I think Highsmith, you made this point yesterday. They're not drawing nearly enough charges. You know who does that? Haywood Highsmith, because he positions himself well, because he's active, he moves his hands, and he's physical. And you know what? He's playing for his damn life. He's not going to get a contract that Max Strus or Gabe Vincent is. Haywood Highsmith is looking to get a job next year. And if it's not in the NBA, it's in China. And so give him the opportunity to play in games when they matter most, I think he's going to bust his ass out there and make a huge positive difference.
He'll latch on as a 15th guy somewhere if it's not Miami, maybe. But
dude, are you
China's
serious?
A steep drop. I mean, maybe Europe first and then China. I mean, that's a few levels. Anyway, not the point. I understand the point that you're making, though a little hyperbolic. However, I will say this: I don't hate that idea. You mentioned Highsmith playing for his life. That goes right into our 5th storyline here, and it's a little bit more forward-looking, but it's very important. There's a few guys on this roster who are playing for their careers right now, and specifically their next contract. Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, Omer Yurtseven, and Haywood Highsmith. All of them are going to be basically free agents. Highsmith's contract next year is non-guaranteed, so it's fully non-guaranteed. So essentially, amounts to a team option, right? Mm-hmm. And so Strus and Vincent are free agents. Yurtseven's a restricted free agent. The Heat were never going to bring all these guys back. They were just never going to be able to afford it. Best case scenario, they all played great. They built on last year, and the Heat were just not going to be able to afford to bring them all back. So that you and I were talking about this since the preseason, right? Like this was big years for all of them. It's been a storyline that we've sort of been loosely monitoring all year. They have not all played great. It's been inconsistent at best for most of them. Gabe Vincent and Max Strus. Yurtseven had to deal with the ankle injury earlier in the year, and that was a problem. And when he came back, he didn't play great when he was in spot minutes when Cody Zeller was out after breaking his nose. Highsmith is probably of this group, played the best out of them, and of the group is weirdly in the best position because at least he has a contract for next year, although it is non-guaranteed. Nobody else does have a contract for next year. So I think these next 5 games, I think it's going to be plus the play-in in the playoffs if that happens. Like these guys can earn contracts based on what the rest of the season looks like, or at least better their odds of re-signing with Miami or impressing some other team and latching on somewhere else. For the record, I do think all of them will end up on NBA teams next year, whether it's the Heat or not. But Which one of them at this point, if the season were to end today, has the best chance, in your opinion, of coming back to Miami next year?
Of coming back?
Yeah.
I mean, it's Highsmith, right? I
Okay,
mean,
so beyond Highsmith, you're right. Yeah, beyond Highsmith.
Gabe Vincent, I think. I think the year 7 experiment has run its course, and I think they love him, and they've sank the years of trying to develop him. And whether it's going to be just a matter of like injury, he'd have to have one hell of a summer, I think, to be able to show that he is on that step towards whatever that next level might be for him, to supplant Cody Zeller or blank center X who could be able to fill in that spot, because right now he's even below that level. He is not a backup center in the NBA, despite what enough of his fans think.
Yeah, I mean, he's below Orlando Robinson right now, I think, in the pecking order. If it wasn't for Orlando Robinson being on a 2-way contract, look, don't be surprised if Omer Yurtseven doesn't finish the year on the Miami Heat. Like, he might be gone before that, because the Heat
waived out, right?
What?
Wave them outright, and then
wave them, and then add Orlando Robinson on one of those fancy three-year contract the Heat do that kind of keep these young guys deal, with. Yeah, the Kendrick Nunn thing. Yeah, don't be surprised if that happens. I'm just saying. Between Max Strus and Gabe Vincent,
are you breaking news? Are you this intel?
Not breaking news. Just saying, don't be surprised if it happens.
You're breaking news. Is this intel? Or is this like an inside source? You got to frame it that way. And insider.
We could try to get we could do what other podcasts do and just try to get aggregated, but we're not going to do that. I'm just going to say, don't be surprised. Gabe Vincent, I agree with you. I think Gabe Vincent is probably he's starting right now, so that's not like a stretch. And then the fact that they still have Duncan Robinson on the roster, and he's sort of maybe kind of played his way back into the rotation somehow. I don't know. We'll see if he could build on this Knicks thing. I have no idea what to think, but I would say that Gabe Vincent probably is the most likely one. I just
think he has least appeal across the league too. Like he's probably at this point the better. Yeah, I think he's the better option. But as an undersized guard, you're not going to get that kind of deal elsewhere. Like he'd have to be really, really good. Like Fred VanVleet is an undersized guard, and I don't know that he would have gotten the deal he had gotten if not for the fact that he's played really, really well. And that's substantially better.
Averaged 20 points a game for a season.
He was substantially better than Gabe. Yeah, he's substantially better than Gabe Vincent.
And also sort of Gabe's like one of those guys. I love Gabe Vincent, but I think he has like more value to Miami because he plays point guard and he knows how to run the offense and do that. And it is kind of hard to find backup point guards who know your system and are comfortable in it and know your core players. And he's best friends with Bam Adebayo, so that stuff matters. Like that stuff really does matter.
Feisty, athletic wing player that can shoot threes sounds like a great deal, and that's the appeal that Max Strus has around. Another guy who's got more upside too, because he's he's worked himself to this point. He was a starter on an NBA playoff team last year. I think that kind of GMs are simplistic in the terms of like how they view a player. Like he might not be a prototype.
Teams will look at Max Strus and say, we can get this guy at maybe partial of the mid-level exception at this point, maybe a minimum. I really have no idea what Max Strus is going to go for. It's not going to be
4 for 7.
It's not going to be like, something like that. I mean, you and I were talking, I remember opening of the season, like, oh, what do we think Max is going to get? Like, could he get $7-8 million a year? Could he get a full NLE from somebody? That does not feel like it would be the case right now. That's literally me guessing on that. I haven't talked to anybody about what Max Strus could be worth, but I mean,
more intel,
he's got a track record.
Aggregate that too. Max Strus is going to get $5 million.
There you go. Yeah, Max Strus, $5 a season. All right, 5 storylines, 5 games left. We will have a recap for you after every game, going the rest of the way, even the weekend ones. We're really excited. Then the play-in tournament, and then maybe even a playoff run. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On Heat on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Hit the like button now. Into the Heat culture bracket update. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. We ran long on this one. We're gonna do that as a separate video. We're gonna do that as a separate podcast for everybody still listening. Heat culture bracket, separate podcast, separate video on YouTube. That'll be coming up next. Make your second listen game to game NBA. You can get it everywhere that you get Locked On NBA. It's available on Odyssey app, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. David, thanks for joining me.
You got it, Wes.